Good evening, 49er faithful. Welcome to another episode of Between Two Beards. We were off for a week, but we are back full off-season mode. Hyped about the upcoming stuff in the off-season. Very excited about the combine, free agency coming up, and of course, the draft next month. Very excited to be here. I am your host, Rob Schuh. As always, that is my co-host, Randon McMahon. Randon out there in Texas. How you doing out there, my friend?
I'm doing good. Debo's already on Instagram saying that he's ready to roll for the next season, getting his training going. I started my new training today, getting the workout pumped. I'm feeling swole, as they call it, like winter solstice is what we call it out here,
Winter solstice.
Getting it going for pool season, so it's pretty good, man.
Yes.
Niners news rampant. There's a couple good podcasts that came out with Fred Warner and CMC on Bustin' with the Boys to talk about. Never dull moment here in the offseason for the Niners.
There isn't. The NFL has created this, 365 news cycle that is insane. I feel like on top of that, the 49ers have added in layers of drama, in particular, obviously, around the quarterback position, which we will talk about today. We're going to get into an entertaining topic to start off. We're going to talk about the top 5 players on the Niners. Fred Warner throwing down the gauntlet, putting himself atop at number 1. We will get into that, whether we agree or not. But I want to thank those that are here already in the chat. What's that, Randon?
How have you been? You asked me how I've been. How was your week off?
I've been good. The week off was good. It was restful. I am, Portland has had all sorts of crazy weather up here. We had a snowstorm, 11 inches of powder, the second most snow to ever hit in a single day in Portland. Of course, I had to go out in the middle of the night, wander through the powder and soak it in like a child, just having fun, throwing snowballs. Middle of the work week, I don't care. This city shuts down for snow, and I am here for it because I am like a full-grown child, as one can tell when I spend my time talking about the 49ers. But it's been a good week. It was a restful week, a much-needed week, busy week at work, but glad to get back into it, my friend.
Good. Hey,
let's welcome
we're gonna be
those
fast, wet and wild here today. 50 minutes, man. We got some good stuff to get.
We got to get into it, right? Because you have an upcoming live stream after this for Hockey Royalty. All the information is down below. People should follow along with that. There are folks already chilling here, and I want to say what's up to them. Bubba Stivers coming in. Hey, suggesting to trade Trey to Baltimore for a second-round pick and get Lamar Jackson on board. Asking if we agree. We're going to talk about Lamar Jackson coming up in a couple of topics. Dustin Kohler, our resident Lions fan in the house. Interesting time of year with free agency and the draft looming. As far as Lamar, no. Who wants to pay that guaranteed money and give up 2 firsts? No thanks. One pride, baby. Hey, go Lions. I represent. Raphael 562 Niners is in the house. Sound Grips is here. Brian Diaz is here, and Darren Worthington. Good to see you all. We are getting into it here. Let's talk about Fred Warner's list. I got to say, I love the fact that Fred just throws himself atop it. Like that speaks to the level of confidence that someone should have about their own ability when they are playing within the NFL. And let's be honest, that Fred is good enough that it's not laughable. It may not be my opinion. It may not be your opinion, but it's certainly, you can make a cogent argument for it. So here's his list. And then we'll go through and talk about whether we agree and where we place these names, whether we agree with him. We also have Brandon Ayuk's list on here. But Fred came in number 1 for himself. I'm holding down the top spot. And then he got into a little mental debate with himself about, well, is it Trent or is it Nick at 2 and 3? You could flop him either way. But then he says, no, we've been talking about Trent Williams as the best, potentially the best player in football. So Trent has to be number 2. That slides Nick Bosa into 3. And then he goes through it again. CMC, Debo, back and forth. He puts CMC into 4th, Debo as 5th. And that leaves, with honorable mention, George Kittle off of the podium there. I love Brandon Ayuk's response to that. He comes back in on Instagram, I believe. Post first, Fred, shut up. That's beautiful. Like, that's good teammate. That's good sportsmanship. Comes in to say, no, I'm number 1. Brandon Ayuk 1, Debo 2, Trent 3, George 4, CMC 5. And then honorable mention, I thought this was cool. He put Jawan Jennings as honorable mention for 6. All right, so we put in Brandon Ayuk just to have some flavor there, but let's talk about Fred's list. So Fred number 1, Trent 2, Nick 3, CMC 4, and Debo 5. Honorable mention for George Kittle. How are you feeling about that list?
I mean, they are the top players in the team. I think Fred Warner also, if you watch the whole thing, like his agent was there, and like he probably was like, it's probably best to put yourself first so that way you don't piss off anybody. But it's just a list. I mean, he's earned it, 2 All-Pros, right? So I mean, and he is the best linebacker in football, in my opinion. And so like there's no steam there. And they were talking about it before. If you go farther back, like they were talking about like, hey, like you guys are just loaded. Like you guys are literally a Pro Bowl affair every practice with how many All-Pros you guys got on both sides. So, it's something that's funny to me, but I think it's true. I mean, you could put Trent Williams ahead of Bosa. Bosa had Defensive Player of the Year, and Bosa will tell you it's no picnic going up against Trent Williams at practice.
Right.
Although then Fred also said like Trent Williams is just kind of a weird dude. Like he just shows up to practice all gangly. He just puts in his work, takes Wednesdays off, like goes through the motions, and then he just goes Super Saiyan on Sundays and just trashes people. Like,
He's so insane.
Yeah, I know. So I think I probably would put Kittle above Debo. But I mean, it's like you're splitting hairs at that point. They're all pros and they're all own right. I just think I mean, yeah, it's just me, I guess. I mean, I guess you're just splitting hairs at that point, and I think they were just having fun with it. Like you listen to all their podcasts with Taylor Lewan. It's like locker room talk. It's like that's kind of what it is.
Absolutely locker room talk. Absolutely trash talk amongst teammates. If I'm putting together a stack ranking myself, I think I've got, because of that idea that we are talking about him as one of the best players in football, I've got to have Trent Williams there at the number 1 spot for me. And then I'm putting Nick Bosa in 2 right behind Trent. So I like his stack ranking of having them back to back. But then I'm putting CMC right behind him. So I'm going Trent, Nick, and CMC. And then it's a tough call for me. I think I slayed in Fred as 4th best there. And you could make an argument and sway me to bump him up to 3rd and Christian McCaffrey down to 4th for sure. And the last one is tough. I go back and forth as to whether it's Debo or Kittle. I think I'm going to side with Fred Warner on that one. I'm going to slide in Debo as the 5th player there and Kittle as that honorable mention. So I like who he has in the top 5, and it truly is just the stack ranking that I have a little bit of issue with, but it's not completely out of whack. You could change around a couple, and I'm not going to object to that.
Yeah, I mean, they're all interchangeable at that point, right? I mean, you're probably looking at the most consistent player on the team is probably Trent Williams. And then I would say, this last season is Fred Warner. I mean, consistently, every single game was
it's true
what it was. I mean, not that Nick Bosa didn't have his consistency. I think he was a sack per game until like week 14 or something like that. So like he was pretty consistent as well, especially getting no help from the rest of the defensive line. And so like you're looking at those things. I think that you look at where you can kind of like split hairs here is I think CMC is up there because once he became on the team, he was the most consistent weapon on the offense.
Yes.
And then between Debo and George Kittle, like George in the beginning of the season really wasn't utilized. Obviously they both have missed time. It was a down year for Debo comparison to his all-pro year. So like, if you want to take an angle that, to justify the 4th or the 5th and honorable mention,
right,
you could probably talk me into it at that point.
Right. Because if you go to the idea of, well, their greatest seasons, right? Obviously Debo has the better all-time season versus Kittle. But if you look at consistency or this past season, you could make the counter argument there as well. I definitely think CMC, to me, where he falls on that list, it absolutely has to do with what you're talking about. Like he was the unlock for this offense. This offense had an amazing cast of characters before Christian McCaffrey arrived. And yet when you look at the splits of pre-McCaffrey and post-McCaffrey, it was insane, the difference that he made. And I believe that, yeah, that absolutely has to be recognized in those rankings. All right, so we're in basic alignment with Fred. We like his trash talk. Let's get on to a less fun topic to talk about. Maybe it's a good one. Maybe everything goes swimmingly. But tomorrow, unless things get postponed, Brock Purdy finally does go in for that surgery. It is interesting to me that it got moved to a Friday. And I saw on Twitter, and this is a bit of a conspiracy theory take on it, and I'm not huge on conspiracy theory takes. And yet, there are some things out there. Like Friday news dumps are very real. It's much more of a political ploy that's used wherein, hey, if you've got a piece of bad news, you typically put it out on a Friday right before a weekend because people then don't pay attention to it and they forget about it by the time it comes around to Monday. And I saw someone jokingly refer to the idea of Purdy's surgery going from where I think it was originally slated during the week this week to then being finalized for Friday as a potential news dump. Are you at all worried about what outcome we hear when we're talking about the difference of a partial reconstruction that has him ready to go come beginning of the year, maybe missing a couple of games at the beginning of the season, but probably ready to go start of the season, or the full Tommy John surgery? Do you have concerns about that given the way things have gotten pushed back?
I mean, obviously you don't want the Tommy John, but
right.
Ultimately Purdy's going to do what's best for him, right? And
long-term health.
We said this on the last pod, or at least I did, like I'm all in on Trey Lance. Like, let's get him all the reps. Let's do this. I'm not worried about when Purdy is coming back, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because it's all about when he's healthy. And if they need to put him on the PUP list and have him sit 4 games, even though he could probably be a backup, they need to do that. Because there's no harm not to, right? I'm sure there's maybe cap implications and this and that and all that kind of stuff. But like, as long as he's ready by week 6, week 7, week 8, like I'm fine with that, because hopefully we can piece it together for the first 6 weeks. Hopefully Trey Lance just blows it out of the water and we're not piecing anything together. Right.
Right.
But whether it's some of the veterans being thrown around like Matt Ryan, maybe it's like what I want to do and draft maybe a 3 or 4 year starter out of college to back him up and keep it cheap. You hope that Trey Lance is just healthy and wins and can like win some games early on. And then you have a dominant backup in Brock and you're not worried about it, because at that point, if Lance does what you want him to do and elevates the team higher than Purdy, then great, right? And you still got a cheap quarterback room. Nothing wrong with that. Even if you want to shop Purdy at that point and get a first or second for him, considering he's still the cheapest quarterback that you possibly could have, being the last overall pick, then go ahead and recoup some of that, what you gave up to get Trey Lance, several years ago. So I'm not really worried about it. I want the best for the health of the kid, but realistically, the start of the season has nothing to do with Brock Purdy, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at, even if things go well, right? It is the Trey Lance show for the vast majority, if not the entirety of the offseason. And that is the more fascinating storyline for the time being is to find out what the 49ers have. I do think it will be interesting if, as I think you and I hope and both suspect, Trey Lance does have that talent that warranted being drafted where he was. It presents the 49ers with a quality problem to have, wherein then if you've proven that Trey Lance is also the guy and Brock is still the guy and recovers from that surgery, you do have a question mark around, hey, do we just try and keep these guys to insulate our quarterback room? Do we want to just take into, past behavior or past outcomes into account and say, hey, we've never gotten through a season recently with healthy quarterbacks, so let's just keep them both? Or to your point, do you then try and recoup some of that draft capital and build out the rest of the team and count on the fact that, hey, this injury trend is just that. It's bad luck. It's a trend. It will reverse at some point. And if you have additional assets, you're going to be able to build. I will say, in leading into our next topic around the feelings around Lance, I think that because it is the Lance show for the offseason, the way in which the 49ers approach that depth at the quarterback position is going to tell us a hell of a lot about how they feel about Trey Lance. There was admittedly, a hell of a funny meme or GIF or whatever that made its way out of the draft, wherein someone noticed as John Lynch was talking about Trey Lance, he began to scratch his head. So they pulled the Seinfeld clip that talks about, when you scratch on your face, the higher it is, the worse you're lying. And so John Lynch is scratching the top of his, you cannot get any higher than he's reaching for in that one. And I do think it's fair to question at this point how the 49ers feel. I don't know that it's fair to take that next leap and assume that they're cold on Trey Lance or that they no longer have the same level of excitement. But my stance is that the way in which they approach that quarterback position, if they do what you're talking about, if they draft a quarterback towards the end, they go for a 4-year starter in college and they bring them in, that to me is a vote of confidence in Trey Lance. they start to explore and bring in a name like Andy Dalton, Matt Ryan, any of those retreads, now I'm a little bit concerned about how the coaching staff and the front office feel about Trey Lance, because it doesn't really matter how I feel about them. It matters the chance they're going to give them. Do you get that same impression, or do you feel a little bit differently about how the 49ers fill out the rest of the quarterback room?
I agree with you. I just don't agree with the players that you mentioned, right? I think
Gotcha.
Matt Ryan's washed. But Matt Ryan
still falls into that category of, if they bring him on, they may still have faith in Trey Lance.
Yeah, he's a veteran. Yeah. It'll probably be a fully incentive laden deal where he's making a couple million and he'll get per game incentive bonuses for how many games he starts and all that kind of stuff like that. I think where it would be indicative that they have little to no faith in Lance is like if they go out and get somebody like Marcus Mariota, and sign him for a $10 million. Right, that's a lot for a backup quarterback.
That's a lot.
And then you are doing all, you're really thinking, okay, like that's a legit guy. I mean,
yes,
not that he was record-wise effective in Atlanta, but we were there firsthand. I mean, he made the passes when he needed to. He made enough plays with his legs, and Arizona didn't have a top 1-2 defense. So like you could reasonably think that Mariota would win a lot of games with the Niners. But if you're talking about Matt Ryan being a veteran to where when Purdy comes back, he could sit with a clipboard or they could cut him or whatever on the team, and he's just earning a paycheck to be around. I don't know if Matt Ryan, a perennial starter, ex-MVP, would want to do that.
Right.
But, I mean, you look at Andy Dalton got $10 million something, I think $10 million or $12 million last year. So
do you see him in that category of Mariota? Do you see Dalton and Mariota as like, hey, if they bring in Dalton and they spend $10 million, then their faith in Lance may not be crystallized?
No, I think Mariota is pretty much the one I'm thinking of. Maybe Teddy Bridgewater.
I like that call.
But there's also plenty of other backups. Like they could bring in Nick Mullins, right? Like they could bring in Nick Mullins, and that wouldn't mean anything to me for Trey Lance. So it really just depends on where they go. They need three quarterbacks for camp. So you're going to reasonably see the Niners bring in 2 guys. So
they have to.
Whether it is Nick Mullins and this rookie, which that's kind of where I would go, because Nick Mullins knows the offense. If the rookie doesn't pan out like Brock Purdy panned out at a camp, no harm, no foul. You got Nick Mullins for 6 weeks, and then you got Brock Purdy, right? And then you cut Nick Mullins because he's making $1 or $2 million. Like that's kind of where I would go with it. If Matt Ryan's willing to play for an incentive-laden deal, like a $1 million, he just sits on the bench and helps greasy groom Trey Lance, I'd be all for that too. But I'm not paying a backup over $5 million. I probably wouldn't even pay a backup over $4 million because, like I was so heated last time, it's like you got to give Trey Lance the job and let the kid cook. Like I don't understand.
Yeah, no, you were heated last time. I remember that. Afterwards, I had to think to myself: Is Randon mad at me? Have I offended? I'm kidding. I didn't care.
I don't live in Portland like you do.
No. There's less sensitivity going on in Texas. But I'm in lockstep with you, and Ian Sharp puts it out here as well, right? Some of the retreads will cost too much. That, I think, to me, is the meridian line of whether or not the 49ers have faith in Lance, is what do they spend on that position? If they go out and they get the rookie, as you have made the case for, and I think they probably will, whether that's the 3rd or the 4th quarterback in the room is sort of what's up for debate. But if they spend less than $5 million, I think that's a fair amount. If you're spending less than $5 million, you're getting one of those projects, right? You're getting somebody that really has no shot at being a starter, really isn't going to compete for a viable backup job on a Super Bowl contender. Because when you get into that category, that's where you have the Daltons and the people that are making that $8 to $10 million. If the Niners do spend that $8 to $10 million on a backup, now I'm going to start having some questions. My hope is that they do not, that they spend less there unless there is injury news that comes out after Friday. If that changes, if the timeline on Brock Purdy changes, then my take on what the Niners should do at that backup position changes as well. But I'd be interested to hear for you. Would you still pursue the rookie and just be all in on Lance and take that cost-effective measure and try to use that money elsewhere as opposed to wasting potentially $8 million on a backup?
Yeah, let's go all in. Because realistically, it's like, okay, if this team doesn't have Purdy and we're real, like, Okay, you sign a quarterback for 10 million, say Marcus Mariota, 10, 12
Right.
million. Okay, we only have 15 million in cap right now. We have, before restructures, right? So you're not getting almost anybody,
happening.
right? So, and not that the Niners can't restructure deals,
right?
Because they should, and they probably are going to have to.
They absolutely will.
That kicks the can down the road. The Niners were bottom 5 in the league in dead money, paying players that no longer are upon their team. And that's what makes them a good and solid core. And now you're looking at teams like, the Rams were able to do it for 1 year, but they were atrocious last year. They had tons of dead money and players.
It fell apart.
Fell apart, right? Obviously, I would take a Super Bowl, but you're looking at
me too.
But you're looking at how are the Niners going to be able to create a dynasty in the form of we make the playoffs the next 10 seasons, right? That's not going to be from the dead money. And so they're going to have to figure out some ways to go cheap. You can't sign everybody, right? My thought process is, okay, well, let's get Nick Mullins, not only because he's familiar with the offense, but he's also familiar with the rehab that Purdy's going to be going through. He had the same procedure. So
right.
You're going to have a guy in the room that knows exactly what he's going through. Purdy can bounce ideas off of him, be there for emotional support, that type of thing. Because you think about Purdy,
knows the system.
You think about Purdy, like he must be thinking in his head, like, if I stayed healthy, this was my gig. Like I came from Missile Irrelevant to lead one of the best teams in football.
Yep.
And now he's going to have to do it again. And if Trey Lance balls out, you're SOL. Like it really is what it is. And so I'm on the fan of like, hey, let's bring in him and a rookie, a guy that's competitive, and then you let them battle out for a backup in camp, and put all your chips into the Trey Lance bucket.
I like that strategy. I absolutely do. And just to follow up, Nick Mullins had the full Tommy John surgery, right? He had the full reconstruction, had to take the entire year off as a result.
I think he just had the reconstruction because I thought I remembered an article saying that he was thrown after 4 months, but don't quote me on that. Yeah. Nice.
We'll have to look into it because I do think that that's a possibility, in particular when looking at one of those camp arms that potentially you bring in as that fourth individual, even if you bring in a bigger name.
CJ Beathard was throwing a Kittle at his ranch yesterday.
CJ, yeah. How about Kittle's football field that he had freaking installed? Just balling out, man. I'm here for it. All right, so we got to talk about it. I mean, Lamar Jackson, it's hard for me to believe that something doesn't get done with Baltimore. It seems like a ploy by Baltimore that says, hey, like, we don't actually believe anyone's going to come in and sweep us off our feet and write a deal for you that we can't match. So we're going to risk it, and we're just going to allow you to negotiate with other teams. And then when you see that your value isn't quite where you thought it was as far as the guaranteed money, then we'll be able to get that deal done with you. So that's my view around the way in which this most likely plays out. However, this is one of those situations, much like Christian McCaffrey, that you cannot not do your due diligence. You have to, because you just never know how desperate the other team might get, what direction they may want to go, or how that player is going to react and potentially go nuclear as far as trying to end a relationship. We saw today, and we'll be hitting on this later, Za'Darius Smith, right? Talking about wanting to leave the Vikings and saying goodbye to Skull Nation. Taking the nuclear option, the Vikings then quickly coming out and saying, yeah, we're not going to release Za'Darius Smith. But Za'Darius took the Debo route of like, hey, call my bluff, but I am on social media. I am out. And so you could see Lamar eventually doing that. But is there a scenario where you see the 49ers expressing legitimate interest beyond just the, hey, we're kicking the tires, any player that becomes available, we will do our due diligence? Is there a set of circumstances that unfold wherein you think the Niners actually pursue Lamar Jackson?
No, because it would mean reconstructing your team in a different way. You would have to have a big enough contract going out, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of proposes Bosa, Lance, and a first for Lamar Jackson, right? Because Bosa's going to make $30 to $35 million.
Right.
So one, I don't blame Lamar Jackson for wanting this, because the point of getting signed, especially at the quarterback market, is to outdo the person before you.
That's right.
It's not his fault the Browns are dumb and paid Deshaun Watson. That's not his fault. So, and so it's like, but then it's also the Ravens like, okay, we're not even close. Let's see if you can get a contract out there. I think Adam Schefter said it's never happened for a quarterback ever. Like Matt Castle tried to.
Yeah, they've never got that tag and then gotten a contract from another team.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, let's see what you got out there. Let your agent negotiate. Go ahead and do what you need to do and see where the market comes in.
Yeah.
And then my thing is like, okay, if some team comes in at 5 years, 250 mil fully guaranteed, then the Ravens might be like, well, crap. Okay, well, are we going to take 2 first-round picks, which is not Lamar Jackson's value? Lamar Jackson's probably three first or 2 firsts in a player like Bosa or something like that, because you saw what Russell Wilson got.
Right.
The guy who has more toilets than touchdowns. And it's just something that would be ridiculous, the amount of that a former MVP would attach to. Like, he's still young, right? And if you create an offense around him, just like I think a lot of Niners fans think about Trey Lance, like, hey, like, I know he's an athletic guy. Like, he's probably the most athletic freak out of a quarterback position, but he doesn't need to run for 1,200 yards a year to be effective, right?
No.
Like, if you get him in the room, like, I know a lot of people say his feet are sloppy in the pocket.
The footwork,
kind of
right.
stuff. Yeah. If you get him in a room with a quarterback coach and help him work on his footwork and do that kind of stuff, you know, maybe. But where do you think your question was? Do I think the Niners are fully interested? No,
right.
I don't think Kyle Shanahan is. Reason being is that Kyle Shanahan wants a quarterback that's going to be able to do not only drop back, hit the 5-step drop, and let that ball fly with anticipation, but be able to make some plays off script. And I don't think that. Now, I'm not a quarterback guru, so don't jump on me in the chat here. But I don't think that Lamar Jackson is that high of a pinnacle of just like the pure ball slinger. I think he gets a lot of wide open wider receivers because of his skill set. Now, if Kyle Shanahan's willing to adapt his offense and shake it around and let go of the reins a little bit, then yeah, I mean, he's an MVP for a reason. Like, he still threw 37 touchdowns, which is nothing to laugh at. Like,
and he was up like in the pocket efficiency last year. He was up with a lot of those players, Brady, Rodgers, Mahomes. Like, he was efficient. And you can argue that because of what he can do with his legs, it makes it easier for him against defenses because he is that dual threat, right? That's the advantage of being that way. I think you're probably right about that. I did find Tim Kawakami's article in The Athletic to make a reasonable case for the 1% chance, the 0.5% chance that the Niners would get in on this. So I like what you say about Kyle Shanahan has a particular vision in mind for a quarterback. And I think you're right about that. Lamar doesn't fit it. Lamar is, however, a next level talent. And I believe Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are appreciative of players like that, wherein they may not be a perfect scheme fit for you, but if a player like that becomes available, you at least need to look into it because they could change the entire outset. I agreed with Kawakami in his statement that if the Niners did this move, they would instantaneously be Super Bowl favorites for next year, right? You add Lamar Jackson to this roster. If you don't give up a player in order to do it, if you just give up the 2 ones and then pay the contract, they would instantaneously be the favorite across the board. But it gets complicated because the what has to happen, the scenario that it feels like needs to unfold, is that this carries on beyond the draft, that no team swoops in, that the Ravens don't get a deal done, and it gets beyond the draft because the Niners don't have a first-round pick in this year's draft, quite obviously. But if it gets beyond it, now if they work out a deal with Lamar, they can give up the 2024 and 2025 first-round draft picks. Talk about the cap space. It would be possible for them to free it up without trading away a player, but they would need to, I think, use almost all of the extensions at their disposal. And Jed York has that money in his pocketbook, so it seems, but it also kicks the can down the road, and you have a potential Rams situation where if you do not achieve your Super Bowl, you may have a colossal burnout for this team. And so that becomes an issue. And then you probably do need to include Lance in a trade, right? You've got to try and recoup some of your assets. And at this point, Lance being the healthier of the two, that's probably the asset that you can move. So I don't like it, but if it happened, I would be on cloud 9. I'm not going to lie. If Lamar Jackson were somehow magically transported to the 49ers, much like it felt like Christian McCaffrey was in October of last year, I would feel really good about this squad, even though he's not a perfect fit within this offense.
I mean, yeah, you have the most dynamic team in football at that point.
Right.
I mean,
it would
you
be
really would.
Ridiculous.
And I think I think it's just something that you have to talk about. You have to see what's going on and try to make it work out. Because, I think it's something along those lines. But you're right, because the money would eventually, the toll's eventually going to come due. Eventually, the bill's going to have to be paid. If you kick all these down the line, like that makes the Niners Super Bowl window maybe 3 years, 4 years until all these contracts come due.
Because that bill comes real due. Like the end of Kittle's contract is ridiculous. The end of Trent Williams' contract is ridiculous. And those bills start to come.
$25 million this year. Like, it's ridiculous. So
right.
There's only so much you can backload a contract, right? Because you have the signing bonuses that have to be paid out equally throughout the entire term.
Yep.
And all that kind of stuff like that. So you're going to start paying Lamar Jackson $75-80 million in 5 years because you want to backload it that much? Like I know the cap's going to go up, but like to what extent? Like,
yeah, but how much?
Yeah, right. So it just really depends, but you definitely have to do your due diligence and
have to.
Like the quarterback is the hardest position to solve.
Yeah.
Now, do the Niners really think that Lamar is a decade-long starter? Because eventually his legs are not going to be what they used to be.
Right. That's a fact.
And so is he a decade-long starter in the pocket? Do they believe that he can slowly move his game to where he's less running and more throwing? That's going to be something for them to scout and do what they believe.
Yeah.
Because if not, like, this is a 5-year window. Because he'll be 31 and then that's it, And so, like, I assume Lamar is going to want more than a 5-year contract. I don't know. Maybe he just wants all the guaranteed money. Maybe he wants just, hey, I want a 5x250 fully guaranteed. Let's roll it, and I'll run my body into the ground. I don't know.
I'll tell you what. You guarantee me $250 million? Like, I don't need to know what my next contract is. I just got $250 million. Yeah, that's ridiculous. So you could be right that he may not be concerned. But you do have to view it that way, that either you believe he will continue to mature as a pocket passer and get better and better and better, and as his legs are less effective, that he will grow in that way, or you're viewing him as a more short term. I'm here with Wanda Brown that, hey, love me some Lance, but Lamar would take us to the Super Bowl. I absolutely agree with that. This is the only veteran move wherein I'd really be okay with the Niners not pursuing all in on Lance, all in on Purdy. Like, I feel so good about those two being in the quarterback room, and I really want one of them to be successful. And this hypothetical, as unlikely as it is to happen, if it did, I would be 1,000% on board with it.
Are you okay with trading Bosa as part of the deal?
No. I think when you start to lose other marquee players,
what about
that
Fred
one's
Warner?
Tough for me. If we had the pass rush I thought we were going to have last year, and Bosa was a key component of that, but also had been complemented by a series of players around him, and the Niners were pursuing some of those players coming back, great. But as of right now, it was the Bosa show and really nothing else, right? Nothing of worthy note to call out. And you're hoping that Drake Jackson takes that next step. You're hoping that the Niners are able to pursue one of these available edges in free agency, but you lose Bosa, and now you're taking a huge step back on defense. I don't think I would do that deal. If it were the only way to get it done, are you making the trade with Bosa?
I'm on the thought of this. Yeah, pass rush is great and defense is great, but a defensive end can't win a game for you by himself. A quarterback can win a game for you by himself.
That's fair.
And so it's like Lamar Jackson made the playoffs multiple times with literally Mark Andrews, right? So it's like, and that's it. Like their team was often injured and all this kind of stuff like that. Like, I understand Bosa's my favorite player. I think he's underratedly funny. I think he's dominant at his job. I already have his jersey. So yeah, I wouldn't want to trade that type of player, but you're looking
clearly, if you got the jersey, you can't have the trade.
You can't trade Debo anyways, because you still have to pay him his guaranteed money. Yeah. That's like $30 million. So
the dead money on Debo is astronomical. He doesn't become one. NYCE asking, hey, what happens if nothing happens with Lamar until after the draft? Then I think the Niners become like 3% chance of doing it. Like the percentage goes up, but it doesn't become likely in any way.
Yeah.
Let us talk about someone who is a Niner, because I don't think this happens. I think there is the slightest of chances, and it is something we had to talk about because there is a chance. I would have said the same thing about bringing in Christian McCaffrey had we, I think we did talk about it. I think I did lay out that, no, I didn't think it was likely we'd get a deal done for him. And sure enough, that happened. What else happened today? Well, maybe we have our starting right tackle under contract for a little bit longer. Colton McKivitz getting a 2-year extension. To me, this at a bare minimum says that he's penciled in to compete for the starting role once McGlinchey gets paid, which I think the front office is now expecting, with a moderate favoritism for McGlinchey to land that starting role. This to me feels like the Niners saying, hey, we were ready to roll last year with Aaron Banks, right? We knew from what we saw that we could plug that in and we would still be effective. I am choosing to interpret this extension as meaning that he's favored for that starting role. It could also mean that, hey, we have our swing tackle and we want to lock down our swing tackle regardless of what else we're able to do in free agency. How are you interpreting the extension getting worked out for Colton?
I think McGlinchey's gone, and then I think
that's fair.
McKivitz is going to compete for a job. I think they have to take a tackle. I'm not a person who drafts for need at all, especially even in the third round, because the likelihood of that guy being a quality starter right away is very slim. But like, I think they need, with 3 third-round picks, I think they need to take a tackle at one of those. And so then you're talking about him and McKivitz battling for that spot. I feel like unless they want to choose a guard and kick Burford out, but Burford spent the entire season playing guard and trying to be good and proficient at that position. And then you're going to have him, then you're going to move him out. He's going to learn not a new position, but he's going to relearn a position. Then you're having a rookie play guard. Like, then you're moving more guys out of positions they're not used to. I think you're probably looking at McKivitz battling with a rookie for the right tackle spot.
I think that's fair. It is crazy for me to hear you say, hey, because you have always staunchly been draft for best player available, not drafting for need. So you must view this as a very essential ad to have switched that stance just a little bit. And I love it. That flexibility is key to putting together a good roster here. I want to get to a couple.
I just think because they have 3 picks within 5, they have like 3 picks within 5 spots, right? Yeah. So it's not
you're
like
going to be able to target best player and grab something of need.
Yeah. Like you can afford to reach for one of those if you need to, or go up and get your guy. Like, if you think tackle is that big of a need, go up and get your guy. Because I'm fine when teams have a need and they like, hey, this guy's a dog and let's go get him and let's go move up and get a guy. I'm fine with that because it means they're the best player available and they fit a position of need. Like when they sit back and like, hey, let's just pick this guy because he's a tackle when there's a clearly better player available. Like, I don't like, that's where I'm talking about, to where I prefer best player available. And would you have 3 picks there? You could easily pick a tackle and then pick 2 players that are the best players available at that
right
point.
And you're looking at 10 picks. And so if you want to package a couple together and move up to get your guy, as you're insinuating, it's not the end of the world. It's not as if you don't have the draft capital to do that. Obviously, the Niners don't have a first or a second, but with 3 3s, 3 5ths, that is absolutely going to be some ammunition if they want to move around.
They probably won't have as many third-round picks because they're definitely getting a running back with 1, and then that's only 2 left.
No doubt. Lock that in. Hey, we need to get to the Vegas odds and see what it is for the Niners drafting running back in the 3rd round and lay down some freaking coin on that one. That's a lock, baby. Man, a couple of comments to bring in. Ian Sharp saying, hey, Mike McGlinchey getting a pay raise. I agree with that. I know that there are a lot of Niner faithful who believe McGlinchey to be an unqualified starter within the league. I believe that is bias in our familiarity with him and some of the videos that have made their rounds on 49ers Twitter and things that highlight the mistakes when they're there and make them seem extremely prevalent when the vast majority of what McGlinchey is doing is solid. And I believe NFL front offices recognize that. And so he will be getting paid. Also love Kevin's comment here. Sneakerhead here on the channel, coming in from Glasgow. Love it, Kevin. Says, Rob, LOL at the Lamar conversation. Has everyone given up on Lance? The need is for a defensive tackle or a right tackle. If the Niners are going to spend big, it should be Clark or a few quality draft picks to protect the right side, not McKivitz. So I got to say, Kevin, agree on the idea that for Lance, no, I have not given up on Lance by any means. The only scenario in which I'm really happy the Niners are pursuing something other than giving Lance all of the offseason reps is Lamar, only because of the generational talent that Lamar is. That when players like that become available, when Joe Montana was considering leaving the 49ers, like that's the kind of player that regardless of who you've got behind center, you are going to kick the tires. You've got to explore that, because if you add that individual to your offense, it's going to take it to the next level. When I look at these assets that we have on the offense and I imagine adding Lamar to it, it's just crazy good. But I'm with you that this is Lance's time. I think it's a 1% chance or less that we make the move on Lamar. So I do believe, as Randon has predicted, hey, you lean in. You say this is Lance's opportunity. He's had a couple of them. Injuries got in the way. You could make a case for we weren't really prepared to use him as effectively as we may have. Whatever you might say, this is definitively his best chance to come in and reclaim what would have been his had he stayed healthy.
Like, you're looking at the Niners aren't really like under fire for anything right now. Like,
no.
Right. So like they're a team that, hey, like, let's go with Lance. We'll stick here. We don't need to go out and we don't need to save my job, Kyle Shanahan. I don't need to go out and get Lamar Jackson. There's coaches that are kind of probably on the fence. Robert Saleh, right? 3rd year in, or he's already 3 years in, right? And
yeah,
you look like, okay, the quarterback we picked, he ain't it. We don't got any backups on the roster. They ain't it. That's why they're linked to Aaron Rodgers, because he needs to win.
Right.
Like that's a
desperation move.
That's a team that needs to go all in on a quarterback and get somebody. Right. So like there's different. I think it's going to be a team, or like the Washington Commanders, right? There's so much stink around that franchise that they need to turn the tide around, right?
It's nasty.
They were the worst franchise rated by the players in like facilities and all this kind of stuff like that. Like they need to switch that thing up, you know, like, hey, switching your name from the Redskins to the Commanders didn't really help your reputation, right? Like,
nope.
And so it's like, if they could have Schneider could sell the team and then they get Lamar Jackson to come in, that vaults you up to people are probably picking them to win that division next year.
Yeah.
Right. So
absolutely.
That's kind of a team where I think that needs to really like go all in on it.
Yes. Absolutely agree with that. The Niners are not in that position where they're forced into anything. If they make a move, it should be because they believe it gives them the best chance to win. And I agree. 187 calling out here. Hey, we're talking about quarterbacks. Fred on that interview that we were talking about, Bussin' with the Boys, when what's his name? The host gives Taylor Lewan gives his, hey, I heard from someone, it's not a player, but someone within the league, that Brock Purdy doesn't have it. And Fred comes back to pretty definitively say, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. That is a vote of confidence. And you hope that we see the best from Lance and Brock Purdy comes back healthy. To me, best of both worlds there. No need to add Lamar. Again, I'm going to be hyped, though, if we do. All right, we're going to get into a little segment. We only have, a short window remaining. Obviously, Randon has the live stream going on. He is going to live broadcast the Kings game coming up on Hockey Royalty. The
Kings Avalanche, if you're
Kings Avalanche.
Come on.
Information is down below in the description of the video. So when we wrap up here in about 12 minutes or so, you want to head over there with him, follow that link, give it a subscribe. Even if you don't watch hockey, give a follow to your man, Randon, for that support. Be good folks out there. But we've got this segment that we're going to get into right here that we'll talk about our roster breakdown for special teams. We're going to go through all of the segments of the team, talking about what the Niners currently have and what some of the potential moves or ways in which they can fill in would be. So we're starting with special teams. Obviously, we were talking about Robbie Gould, Tabor Pepper, and coming off a career year, Mitch Wishnowsky. Mitch still obviously under contract. Tabor Pepper gets the fresh extension. I love the storyline of like he's with his wife. They're like doing stuff there. He's getting calls from the office. It's not like the high-end contracts that are getting signed with the quill pen at 4949 Santa
Put it up
Clara
on the
Avenue.
glass. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just quietly a long snapper is getting paid. And he's a blue collar version of an NFL player, right? That kind of position. You don't get the glory, but he's a hard worker. I'm a big fan. And then obviously Robbie Gould, who is a free agent. Very interesting to me that the vast majority of beat reporters for the 49ers have gone to the side of, hey, I'm going to believe Robbie Gould when he says that I am not coming back to the 49ers. However, I will say one of the reporters I trust the most for the San Francisco 49ers, Matt Barrows, says, hey, I'm not saying that he's going to be back. All I'm telling you is he's not done with the 49ers. Like, this is a stance. And yes, it may make it more difficult to get him signed, but it's more in the 50-50 range as to whether Robbie Gould comes back. And I got to be honest, that's music to my ears, because I look at this unit and what they put together and the way they've gelled together, the ability to bring back Tabor Pepper, Mitch, reaching that level that you want him to, hopefully continuing to build upon that. And Robbie Gould, Mr. Clutch in the playoffs, just not missing. If you still believe you've got a few years legitimate Super Bowl contender, that window, having a quality kicker matters. And there aren't very many free agents available that would be on the same par as Robbie Gould. You could get cheaper, but you would be less consistent, in my humble opinion. And it is a crapshoot in drafting a rookie, even if you go for one of those top picks, and you're probably having to select them in the 4th round, like the first kicker that came off of the board last year in the draft. So to me, this one, a phenomenal unit. When I look at this unit, if I'm grading them for last year, I am giving them a solid A. To me, the move that's most important is attempting to bring back Robbie Gould. And I'd love to discuss how you think, if they miss on that, how you think they should fill it back in.
So, I wish Mitch is getting a pay raise, right? So, you got to get cheap somewhere. And I think that's why they're probably going to have to. Like I know Robbie is going to be expensive. Like, if he doesn't want to be in San Francisco, or he's not leaning to coming back, it's going to take money to do so. Which the Niners don't have. So
they do not.
They gave a pay bump to the long snapper, which granted it's a minimum contract or whatever for his tenure there. They're paying the punter more. They got to get cheaper somewhere. And you look at, there's quite a few free agents on there. You have guys that are, older that you might be able to trust, like Greg Zuerlein or stuff like that. I don't know the market value right now for Matt Gay, Gay to the Bay, as they say, is about $5 million, which is what you paid Robbie Gould last year. And he was 100% on extra points, and he's got a good leg and he's reliable. Is that kind of a player that he just goes across the division and plays for that team? Or do you look in the draft and try to break it down? I mean, there's a lot of interesting kickers in this draft that I've done a little bit of research on today about that's a possibility. And then you're getting cheaper at a position. Like I understand the comfort blanket of Robbie Gould and him not missing kicks and all this kind of stuff like that.
Right.
It kind of leans into what the Niners want to do with controlling the clock and playing good defense.
It does.
But at some point you got to get cheaper somewhere. You can't keep paying everybody. And now you're going to have, I don't know what Mitch's contract off the top of my head is, but you got to assume it's $3 to $4 million. Long snapper's $1 million, and then you pay a kicker over $5 million. It's a $10 million special teams room. At some point you gotta get cheaper somewhere. So if they're gonna go for a home run, to be honest with you, I would let Robbie Gould walk and sign Matt Gay, because he's 28. You probably could sign him to a 5, 6, 7-year deal and stretch out that money a little bit to where figure out a way to keep him cheap in the beginning. And do that kind of stuff. But if you're going prospects, I got a couple people for you. Where would you rather go, though, before I start bringing out some names?
Yeah, so this one's interesting to me. I have heard it bandied about. I agree with you that of the names available, there are a couple in free agency that I would find to be suitable. Matt Gay, top of the list for sure. Eddie Pinheiro also is going to be in there for me. That one feels cheaper, because I have heard some reference that because of Matt Gay's age and the fact that he is on par with Robbie Gould, that you may actually see him getting a bigger deal than Robbie Gould. And obviously you got to wait for free agency to play out to see if that's the reality. But if that becomes the case, I go back to, hey, if I'm paying one of the two, I'm going to pay the one that we know, right? So I'm bringing in Robbie Gould if it's at the same level as Matt Gay. If not, I think you do have to try and get cheaper at the position. I would absolutely consider bringing in Pinheiro, who feels like that tier 2 there. But a best case scenario is hitting a home run on selecting one of the rookies. It's just such a crapshoot to me that becomes pretty risky. I agree with what Kevin is bringing in here on this one. He says, kickers, yay, most underrated player on the team. They score points and potential game winners. I love kickers, in my opinion. Who would you draft if Robbie goes? So that leads us into the draft scenario. Lay us out some of those names that you went through. I'll tell you right off of the bat, the one I've got my eye on is the kid coming out of Michigan. That's the one that I like there if I'm going that route.
So yeah, he's the big leg, right? So
yep.
He converted 92% of field goal attempts last season, every single one of his extra points, and he became the first player to Michigan to ever win the Luke Rosa Award, which is the best kicker. He's got a lot of things, but this is definitely his best season. So he's getting better. He has the leg, but he's under 50% for 50-yard plus attempts, right? So which is part of the league, right? And so
it is.
It's not always, most of the time you don't want them to miss the easy kicks, right?
Nope.
But he does have the leg to go deeper if need be. And so like he's one of my favorites. I think there's a couple other ones here that I like, and the one that I really like here is Andre. I don't know how you pronounce the last name, Schmitz from Syracuse. Nice. And so he had a difficult year in 2021, but he won the Lou Groza award as a freshman, and then he also pretty much duplicated his numbers this year. But Moody won the award, and so he was responsible for 151 of Syracuse points this year. So constantly getting asked to kick. His percentage was 88.2. So not in the 90s. He was 100% on extra points, but he was reliable as he never missed over 50 yards this season. Granted, only a small sample size, I believe, of 2 to 3 kicks during the regular season, and then he made a huge one in the Orange Bowl, I believe. Not the bowl game over Virginia. So it was a kick that was not only high pressure, but from deep. So there's a couple people there that I like. I'm not even opposed to, hey, let's get like a guy like Chase McLaughlin, who had a really good season in Indiana,
right?
Fell off and draft a rookie kicker and let them battle it out.
Have a competition
and just keep it super cheap and let the best man win. Like I'm fine with that too.
Real quick, what's option 1 for you? Are you Matt Gay 1, draft a kicker 2, or are you flip-flopping that?
I want to get cheaper, but if they're going to go for a big kicker, I'm pretty much out on Robbie Gould, to be honest with you. So like
he's hit that age and the expense where you're like, hey, it's just not worth the juice ain't worth the squeeze.
Yeah, go for a younger guy. Go for a guy that's proven, like Matt Gay, who's 28 years old, probably get the bag. I know Pinheiro had his best season ever, so maybe that's something that you might be able to capitalize on again. But there's nothing reason to go with a Chase McLaughlin and draft a rookie and have them battle it out, because again, got to get cheaper somewhere. You can't keep signing everybody. You can't keep signing everybody. So,
all right, I love it. We got one topic we're going to hit the end, but a couple of comments to bring in. Bro Montana, appreciate that. Sneakerhead on the channel coming in. Peace, fellas. Keep up the great work. Thank you for stopping in, Bro Montana. Hopefully you and all the others hit the like button on your way out. I'm bringing this one up because he agrees with some of my takes, and Tom is an insightful dude. Tom Jensen, Sneakerhead here on the channel, says, hey, let Robbie go. Pinheiro, 94% on field goals, only about $1 million. Or, to your point, draft Jake Moody, the 59-yarder versus TCU. By the way, volume isn't value on picks. All 3/3 only get to 62. That's true. If you want to trade up, you don't have all that much draft capital. You can't get too high. That's good advice for anyone listening. Can't get too high. CT Law coming in with the big gun. CT Law, Sneakerhead here on the channel. Thank you for the donation. Very much appreciate it. Says, hey, pal, good to see you on. It's good to see you too, CT Law. Looks like my boy Jimmy G is moving on. It does look that way. Lance is unproven, and what we had seen, mediocre at best. Purdy looks promising and seriously hurt. What's the plan, Stan? That is a great question. You've seen Randon and I are both still on the side of, hey, you've got Lance and Purdy. Between the two, you have a very viable quarterback room. I still tend to think that a less expensive option, something that costs $5 million or less, or a draft pick, could fill out that quarterback room so long as the surgery goes well for Purdy. I think the big piece for me is how does that surgery go tomorrow? What are your quick thoughts on that super chat from CT Law?
I think Lance has been better than mediocre in some of his games, especially against Houston. I didn't hold it against Jimmy G when they played Indy in the monsoon. I'm not going to hold it against Trey Lance, even though before the fourth quarter, he was feathering those balls in left and right. He was actually a top 10 quarterback on that week through 3 quarters, according to PFF. So mediocre is a little bit hard grader there, CT Law. You have to go. You made the investment, right?
Right. You got to see.
And when you make an investment, you follow through with that investment, right? My workouts weren't getting it done in my New Year's resolution. You drop some coin on some workouts and some vitamins and stuff like that. You take it more seriously. I think the Niners need to take Trey Lance seriously and give him a shot. And worst case scenario, Purdy's back, week 8, 10, whatever. I don't think it's going to be a full season. It's not baseball where they're out 18 months. So then he's the quarterback the second half of the year and you go for it.
And we've proven we can start 4-4 or 3-5 and get into the playoffs. No problem. We just keep doing that all the time. All right, we are going to get out of here. Randon is getting on his podcast coming up, the Hockey Royalty Podcast. That information is down below. We are closing out with just a little bit of news. Jimmy Ward backtracking a little bit because it makes me happy. He says, hey, if things don't go well in free agency, I'd be open to coming back and playing nickel for the Niners. That's a positive note to end on because I'd like to see Jimmy Ward back. Randon, this is a phenomenal show. I wish you the best covering that game live. Everyone, tune out here. Go tune in with Randon. Follow the links down below in the description of the video. Randon, as always, a pleasure talking football with you, my friend.
It is a pleasure.
Yes, it is. Randon has a new Cheers mug, so that is coming into play. You know how this one works. Raphael562, thank you very much. NYCE 1030, appreciate you as well. We will be back next week, Randon and I both. But until then, cheers, faithful. All right.